The garden gloves sit on the hose reel, untouched. A few leaves have yellowed at the edge of the bed, and one strip of grass has already started to push back in where it was cleared before. From the outside, this can look simple enough. Someone sees you pause, touch the gloves, then turn away, and they think you just do not like dirt, do not know how to relax, or do not have the patience for something as peaceful as a garden. But for some people, the reaction starts somewhere deeper than preference. They do not hate care itself. They hate the feeling of giving effort to something that never stays done. You water, and it dries again. You clear, and it fills back in. You trim, and the shape keeps changing anyway. So the resistance is not always about the plants. Sometimes it is about what the plants represent. Work that asks for care without ever offering the clean, emotional relief of completion. And if that resistance rises this fast, then the problem is already deeper than not liking dirt. And then something quieter starts to show up. At the edge of a raised bed, a few new weeds are already there, small but visible. And before you even bend down, your body may feel the weight of having to begin again. That reaction can be hard to explain to people who think gardening is naturally calming. Because what drains some people is not effort by itself. It is effort inside a system that never really closes. You water today, and the soil will ask again. You pull one thing out, and something else replaces it. You cut back what looks unruly, and a week later the shape has shifted again. For a person who feels steadier when work leaves behind a clear result, that rhythm can feel less like peace and more like erosion. The labor does not seem to build toward a finished state. It seems to dissolve as soon as it is given. And that is only the visible layer of why the dislike can feel so immediate. What makes this harder to explain is where that preference was often shaped. In a quiet garage or at a workbench, you wipe an old wrench once, hang it back in the right place, and feel the small satisfaction of something settled. Many older adults spent years inside forms of responsibility where effort was supposed to lead somewhere clear. You fixed the hinge, tightened the bolt, sorted the drawer, replaced the bulb, and when it was done, it was done. That kind of life teaches the body to trust visible order. It teaches you that work should leave behind a result you can point to, use, and rely on for a while. So when a person shaped by that rhythm stands in front of a garden, they may not experience nurturing first. They may experience a kind of labor that refuses to stay finished. And when that happens, the dislike is not coming from laziness or emotional shallowness. It is often coming from a nervous system that learned to feel safe through results that hold. The part that gets misread most easily is that this pattern often comes with real strength. Picture a hallway drawer open for no dramatic reason, just long enough to line up a few loose batteries by size and put the useful ones where they belong. That is not the gesture of someone who does not care. It is often the gesture of someone who cares enough to want effort, order, and function to match each other cleanly. People like this are often strong at making life workable. They notice what is off. They restore what slipped. They respect usefulness, precision, and the quiet dignity of something doing its job well. In many homes, that kind of practical intelligence has held more together than anyone said out loud. So the resistance to gardening does not automatically mean resistance to care. Sometimes it means a person trusts care most when it creates a result that can be clearly seen, clearly kept, and clearly counted on. And this is where the habit stops looking simple. On a patio table, a few pots sit in decent order, but one leaf is curled, another has yellowed, and something you thought you had already handled looks as if it is slipping again. For some people, that kind of scene creates a very specific kind of friction. Not because they are incapable of care, but because they are easily worn down by forms of care that do not move in a straight line. The hidden cost of needing clear results is that living things do not always cooperate with that need. Growth is uneven. Recovery is partial. Maintenance repeats itself before the mind feels finished with the last round. So a person may start avoiding spaces that other people call healing, simply because those spaces do not offer the kind of proof their system trusts. Then a second pain gets added on top. They do not just dislike the task. They may begin judging themselves for that dislike, as if not enjoying the garden means something smaller or colder about who they are. And this is where people often read it wrong. On the garden path, you pick up the hose nozzle. Think about the dry soil. the weeds coming back, the trimming that never really stays trimmed, and set it down again. From the outside, that can look like stubbornness, fussiness, or a need to have everything your own way. It can look like someone being difficult with something that is supposed to be simple. But the experience on the inside is often very different. The real feeling is closer to this. I do not hate caring. I hate the feeling of caring without ever reaching a place that feels steady. Both things can be true at once. Yes, the person may need more order and closure than others do, but that need is not empty control for its own sake. It is often one of the ways they keep themselves settled in a life stage where so much else changes without asking. What others see as attitude may actually be a very private mismatch between the person and the emotional structure of the task. The more private layer usually shows up later. In one corner of the yard, a plant that looked fine not long ago now leans a little, its leaves softer than they were, and you can feel the resistance before you even reach for it. That reaction is not always about annoyance. Sometimes it touches something harder to admit. For some people, gardening brings them too close to a fear they already carry in other parts of life, the fear that care is not always enough to keep something steady. You do the right things, and the living thing still changes. It still droops, drifts, gets damaged, or asks again. And for a person who feels safest when effort leads to stable proof, that can stir a quiet sense of powerlessness. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just a private discomfort with any relationship where attention does not guarantee stability. At that point, the dislike of gardening is no longer just about mess, weather, or repetition. It may be protecting the person from a deeper feeling that their effort cannot always hold the world in place. Sometimes, I hate gardening is really a harder reaction to what refuses to stay under control. That does not make a person shallow, cold, or less capable of care. It may simply mean they trust visible proof more than slow nurturing without a clear finish line. And once that is named honestly, the dislike starts to look less like a flaw and more like a truthful map of how they stay steady. By this point, the misunderstanding becomes easier to translate. On a shed shelf, you lift the lid on an old coffee can full of nails, and there is a quiet kind of relief in seeing everything still where it belongs. Another person may look at that and think you are overly particular, too attached to small order, maybe even less open to life than you should be. But what is actually happening inside is often much more human than that. The body is relaxing into proof. The mind is settling because effort, use, and result are still connected in a way it can trust. And that is the part many people never see. They see impatience with the garden. What is actually there may be a deep need for care to leave a clear mark, one that holds still long enough to believe in. Some people do not hate gardens. They hate effort that never feels finished. And if someone understood that clearly, they might finally understand this too. It is not a lack of feeling. It is a different path to steadiness. At the side yard, the same garden gloves are still resting on the hose reel. This time, the image means something different. A hand lifts them, holds them for a second, then sets them down again without the old layer of self-accusation. From the outside, that moment might still look small. But now, it no longer has to mean laziness, coldness, or some failure to appreciate what is natural and alive. For some people, the garden does not offer the kind of emotional return their system knows how to trust. What steadies them is not ongoing tending without an endpoint. It is completion, adjustment, repair, and the clear relief of seeing something hold. So the gloves left unused are not always a symbol of refusal. Sometimes they are a truthful sign of how a person is built to find steadiness. And once that is understood, even this quiet turning away can start to look less like a flaw and more like recognition. What this points to in the end is not a weakness in the person, but a pattern in what helps them feel secure. Some people are comforted by growth, by tending, by the slow relationship with things that keep changing. Others feel most like themselves when care creates a result that can be seen, trusted, and held for a while. If gardening fails to bring peace, that does not always mean the heart is closed. Sometimes it means the self is still listening for proof that its effort can truly make something stay.